We're coming off of the Royal Rumble this past weekend in Indianapolis. I was there located in the Circle City, as they call it. And I'll probably be returning back in a few years when the next big events come, SummerSlam and WrestleMania. But I want to start off talking, I was there, and I want to talk a little bit about optics, about what's going on at the stadium itself, what I saw, what I liked, what I didn't like. Which is mostly what I liked. I don't know if there's too much I didn't like. But I will say it is crazy because just going back to the start of us doing the podcast, WWE in 2019 said, I think the Royal Rumble is a stadium event. They ran it at Chase Field in Arizona. It's a baseball stadium, and they kind of indicated at that point it's a stadium event. It's like a PLE plus, right? It's not WrestleMania. But we're not going to do the football stadium thing. And since that time, that's pretty much what they've stuck to. Even when they've gone to football stadiums, they've done the whole curtain off at the 50-yard line, try to get, somewhere between 45 and 55,000. I think at Tropicana Field, right? That's a good example of what they try to do. A pretty full Tropicana Field, around 48,000 they called it. Probably actually less because that stadium's not that big either. But this year they tried doing the same originally. But as the show got closer, they started selling more tickets. Selling more tickets to the point that at showtime, regardless of what you feel about specific numbers, because I don't really, I'm not here to talk about specific numbers or which ones were free or giveaways. That's silly. But for me personally, that was the first time ever I was at a WWE show in a football stadium where nothing outside of where they keep the camera, at the 50-yard line, outside of that specific section, nothing was tarped off. Nothing was empty. It wasn't, like I said, even the baseball stadiums have had like certain sections where they're like kind of, because it's not a baseball stadium, right? And they don't have the same views. So they got to like tarp off certain areas. But this was, I'll just say this much. When WrestleMania comes to town, it might have a bigger feel when it comes to what's going on around Indianapolis. But from a stadium perspective, it can't have any bigger of a crowd because they had the most that I think WWE can do, right? They had a small entranceway and a completely full football stadium. So WrestleMania, they normally have a bigger entranceway. This was like, I want to say this is the first show, like PLE, that they've kind of done the small stage but full stadium since the Clash at the Castle one in the UK. And it's definitely like the first in North America, probably going back to like, WrestleMania 8 in the 90s, which was in Indianapolis. So that was just something like to think like this is the Royal Rumble. And yet this play, like it's not just full, but this is a new Lucas Oil attendance record, right? They said it beat Taylor Swift. It's beaten other events at that place as well.
I'm cool with that.
And it's just crazy to think because, again, like this isn't WrestleMania. And I can tell you if you're not a wrestling fan and I took you to this or I took you to the WrestleMania, I don't know from an optics standpoint, you'd be able to tell the difference, right? Because that's what this WrestleMania, that's part of the excitement is you're not going to your local arena. You're going to this football stadium where it's this massive event. And that's essentially how this was treated. I will say Indianapolis, they did a really good job, and they even were on some news stations talking about how they really wanted to make sure they did a really good job in signage around town. I don't know, Brandon, if you caught any of this. They renamed or, put up fake street signs. I don't know if they renamed.
I saw that.
Yeah, they put up like 20 different street signs. So it wasn't just like around the stadium. It was around the whole city. Was all these street signs and banners and stuff like that. Indianapolis.
Does Pat have a statue yet or just the street name?
Did Pat even have a street name? That's a good question. I didn't even know. Was it Pat McAfee Way or something?
Yeah, I was wondering. I was going to say you were boots on the ground for us. I wasn't sure if he did or not.
I saw Bloodline Boulevard. I saw Damage Control Drive. I saw Liv Morgan Lane, which was the one right in front of the stadium. Saw Cody Street, pretty basic there. Cody Road, maybe.
When do you think Pat's going to get his statue in Indianapolis since he's doing so much for the city?
I mean, do they have a Peyton Manning statue yet?
I feel like they have to. I should know this because I'm a big Peyton Manning fan. I think they do. I'm pretty sure they do. Pat's done a lot. Even WWE, like Michael Cole was pretty much like saying like, hey, Pat's been, like kind of like the ambassador for the city of Indianapolis. And, obviously he got a warm welcome. I mean, there was a lot of he did a lot of stuff on his Pat McAfee show this week. Had a lot of guests, a lot of great guests. CM Punk was on. I think Hulk Hogan was on as well. I did see some clips
that
of
was post Rumble. Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw that.
mean, yeah, and just in the recent stretch since we've been on, I mean, Pat does a great job of, obviously he's a sports guy. He's got an ESPN, but he's the sports entertainment portion of it. Like he really helps push the needle for WWE.
They had him on SmackDown, which he's not typically on SmackDown, doing that little kind of what they call the Okerlund position now, the Saturday Night Main Event.
I like that thing. Though. I like the Okerlund position. A good shout out to the late great Mean Gene.
I'm gonna guess that's just for this past week as like the go home show. That's not gonna stay with SmackDown.
It should though. It should. I mean, anything you could do to kind of pay homage to the late great Mean Gene, I'm good with.
So, well, we're not gonna have Michael Cole and Pat McAfee flying out to where SmackDown is every week, right?
No, I mean, I'm sure they'll do something for Mean Gene. I mean, this, if you're doing something like that, maybe it's going to be I feel like it'll be more of a Saturday Night's Main Event thing going forward because they're making a big deal out of that, is what I would think.
Maybe, and I'm thinking because I know watching Raw, on Netflix without commercials, that during breaks they have that same position where Jackie Redmond is. Yeah. They have wrestlers come out and stuff like that. So maybe that's part of bringing this into the fold is during commercials on Netflix, because SmackDown's the same way. It's on Netflix as well. And I don't know necessarily if when Michael Cole and Pat McAfee, all the stuff that they were doing, if that was like during commercial breaks that weren't on USA Network.
I do want to point out something to you because I work very early, so I don't stay up and watch the full, until 11 o'clock. Well, it's more like 10:30 now with Netflix with everything, mm-hmm. But I don't. So I watch like the first hour religiously, 8 to 9 every Monday night. And what I've noticed is, and because I watch it the next day, so what happens is I pause it, and then I hit the home screen on my TV, and then I go to bed. What I've noticed is, because the commercials are always on in that first hour that I'm watching live, between that point and when I watch the next day, when I pause it, say at 9 o'clock, I pick up right where it is, but then it already edits itself where I have no commercials the rest of the way, which is kind of nice.
Okay, and that includes like when they go to commercial, you get the like Jackie Redmond interviews and stuff?
No, I don't get any Jackie Redmond. It's like pretty much like they go to commercial, it does like a black screen, and then it comes back to Michael Cole like, hey, we're back live,
Okay, so it just skips that.
Yeah, which is I love it because I can get my show in real nice,
It shortens up the show.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so like I said, I've said it before. I really enjoy watching Netflix internationally with Monday Night Raw because you get those Jackie Redmonds. The matches obviously don't cut away. Stuff like that.
Have you tested it yet? Where have you tested it where you can watch Netflix PLEs?
So not live.
I was gonna say you were just at Royal Rumble, for example.
Yes.
That. Yeah.
But I've watched. I put up like an old one. But again, that would be. Those actually, I think, have advertising because I don't have a non-ad. So in the international markets, those still just have like ads like they would. Yeah. But obviously, there'd be no reason for me to go back and watch it on Netflix because on Peacock I have ad-free Peacock. So if I could, I'd watch it on Peacock.
Well, do me a favor and do our listeners and our viewers a favor. I know you watch the international version of it. When you don't go to all the PLEs. The one you don't go to, watch it on that. I'm curious because for me personally, like I want to get rid of Peacock because I want to get rid of as many. Like I want to just kind of slim up my my streaming services, but I can't right now.
Netflix, I will say, it is no WWE. What they have on there is not as good as Peacock, as obviously we know Peacock wasn't as good as WWE Network. So if you can, even if it's just like the cheap version, maybe stick with Peacock for a little bit longer. Just because I think it does have better of the cat. Like what Netflix has is just what they need to have.
Well, what I was reading though is I believe in 2026 at some point. I don't know if it's like January 1st. But WWE kind of came out and Triple H said something about Netflix would essentially pick up everything like PLEs and everything in 2026. That's the rumor, I guess.
It takes me back to the idea of like video games. You ever notice when like a sports video game every single year, because they don't change much, they would always add a new feature. But then when they change to a different system, like they go from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3, they kind of reset it. And then like so what they're selling PlayStation 3, I don't know, Madden 2018, they're selling it on the fact that the graphics are better and it has like less features than Madden 2017 did for the previous system. And then when they have to resell it to you is when they start to add. So it's like every time they get to a new system, it's like they refresh everything to just pretty much be like the game with limited features. Same with WWE, I imagine right now. Like every year, right? They're adding different stages, different stories, different outfits that Bray Wyatt can wear, things like that. But they don't have that back when they first switched over because they want to make sure that they have something to sell you the next year. So imagine Netflix is doing the same. They're not going to just literally like break their iCloud full of content if they don't need to. They're going to try to like make everything seem special. Like, oh, hey, starting next week, we'll have all the In Your Houses on there. Starting next week, we'll have old Raws, stuff like that. I will say, better than all of that, WWE's YouTube channel, I think to kind of circumvent a lot of this, has been really, really good lately. They have a WWE Vault channel, which has got a lot of pay-per-views in full. It's got a ton of content that was never on any of the stuff before. They just recently did like a 40-minute dark match, like matches taped before SmackDowns and Velocities that had people you may not realize ever had tryouts for WWE, Motor City Machine Guns, let's say 2002 kind of thing.
I did see that, actually. I did see
so,
that.
So WWE Vault, I mean, if you're talking about getting rid of Peacock because of the, you might be able to do that because if you really want any kind of old content, I think WWE Vault on YouTube is just really loading it up. And again, if you got a VPN, you can kind of circumvent some of those commercials on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about, and I know you noticed probably watching on TV, I noticed even in person, and it makes a big deal for everybody. Even on TV, I think, it's not just being in person. And I've talked about this before, little touches that go a long way. And somebody actually today at work brought it up to me who watched it on TV and noticed it was a big deal. The elevated rampway when they came out, it was elevated higher, not much, it wasn't like a stage, right? They came out through the tunnel, but it was elevated. And why you notice this, specifically during the women's Royal Rumble match, most of those women, like an Alexa Bliss, 5 foot even, right? And things like that, as you see her walking down and not being just blending in with the crowd and not being like the wall beside her is taller than her. Stephanie McMahon, Triple H always said, WWE superstars are larger than life. And sometimes it's hard to put that on television when they're in a crowd like they were at Lucas Oil. But the elevated rampway, and I wait for the day where they do the same with the ring. But the elevated rampway, even though it wasn't like a huge stage, it wasn't trying to take away seats. It was just trying to elevate themselves in a space they would already be occupying. Really made it so that when I was sitting where I was sitting, or anyone was sitting where they were sitting, they could get a good view of the wrestler coming out. It wasn't like you're standing on your seat if you're on the floor. It wasn't like you're on your tippy toes. Kind of things.
It looked good on TV.
Yes, and like I said, when somebody like Alexa Bliss or Nikki Bella or Io Sky come out, they're kind of shorter people. Most of the women's roster is not Charlotte Flair, and even when it comes to Charlotte Flair, it just makes them look larger. It makes it so that when Charlotte Flair came out, right, your eyes were on like her and not so much the people in the crowd.
Yeah,
like that stuff. It doesn't really cost.
The aesthetics look nicer.
Yeah, it makes it so that they stick out, so that when you're watching on TV or you're watching in person. The reason I say about the elevated ring, so one thing I noticed, and this is why I specifically know that part of my buying of ticket is to be there for the experience. I know that there's two kinds of tickets. There's being there tickets, and then there's really like floor seat tickets. But everything in between is kind of meaningless. And the reason I say that is the people that were right beside the entranceway when the wrestlers came out, the people on the floor. Right when they came out, you see them on TV, they're high-fiving the people, they're high-fiving John Cena, Charlotte Flair, really cool. As soon as they made that turn and they head to the ring, literally every one of those people that was on the rampway, on the aisle, grabbed onto the aisle, looked literally away from the ring, up at the screen. I mean, everyone, because I was looking down because I was elevated, and I could literally see they were looking at me because there was a screen beside me. So they were all staring up at me, watching on television, not even trying to look at the ring, not even don't even waste my time. I can't see that because, again, I'm 40 rows back. The ring is no taller than myself. I'm way back here, and there's people who are way taller than me between now here in the 50-yard line. Why would I waste my time to even gander over at that? So they paid floor seat prices, and not $15,000 or anything, but more than I paid to really watch the screen. I got a choice of watching the screen or watching the small wrestlers, but at least I got the choice to watch the small wrestlers sometimes. With these people, like I said, like they're literally, their bodies were facing away from the ring to look up at the screen. And I say, when it comes to going to a stadium, I say this to everybody, there's really no good seats. You're there because it's a fun experience. You're there because you're part of a record-breaking crowd, and wrestling's cool and popular and all that good stuff. That's first and foremost probably what's most important. If you think that like getting a floor seat, but if you can't afford it, like first 2 rows, don't waste your time with any of that. It's not made. The wrestling ring is not made to be a good view for somebody on the floor from 50, 60 rows back kind of thing. And you even notice too, like when it comes to any events you kind of go to, ever notice that some of the richest and wealthiest and well-off people are watching in a skybox, right? You got the ringside people, but the press, they were up in a box. They were higher than me, right? So they're not covering the event from the floor, right? If you watch basketball, right? The announcers are courtside. If they're not courtside, they're in a box. They're not somewhere like in between, right? They're not like in the 4th row or something like that. It's just kind of a waste there. But overall, I mean, I will say, Indianapolis, it is crazy. We talked about this before. It is not Las Vegas. It is not. It's not even Toronto or New York City or any of these kind of places. It's all about that stadium because really it's a Buffalo, and it's bigger than Buffalo when it comes to population. But when it comes to being there physically, it's Buffalo. It's a fine city. No disrespect to Indianapolis, but no great canyons or gorges or world class mountains or any of that kind of stuff. It's a Midwestern city. It's like Cleveland if they didn't have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? They got the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, so that's maybe the trade-off there. But
yes, as a race fan, I like that.
And I did take a quick trip there. I didn't take the full tour. I'll have to save that for next time. I got to save something for Indianapolis on my next trip. I will say I did stop at the Hoosiers gym, which I had stopped at before, which is always a cool stop. And I'll tell you really quickly because it's what you were just talking about, right? We pull up into the Hoosiers gym. The Hoosiers gym is a wide open gym that you can play basketball in, and it's got caretakers, volunteers who just oversee it during the day hours and kind of will give you like a tour if you want it and tell you the things that you're interested in about the gym. What was filmed where, who stood where, that kind of thing. Yeah. It's a bunch of old 60-year-old basketball loving men. You walk in there, they ask you where you're from, what you doing here, what made you stop by the gym today? And I said, wrestling and all that. You know how they knew about wrestling? His name's Pat McAfee. And they were saying, we just, they knew. They watched the Pat McAfee show. They were saying, yep, I knew that was coming to town. And they started asking me questions about who was who's Stephanie McMahon, all these kind of things because they saw her on Pat McAfee and they watched that every day.
That's what Pat does. Like people, like whatever WWE's paying him, I don't know what the number is, but I think they're getting a pretty good return on investment because you just made a great point where you got people that are, let's just say that, like you said, they're elderly gentlemen that are, probably not wrestling fans, but they know about wrestling because of Pat McAfee.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I will say, as we move on to talking, about the Royal Rumble itself, we talk about people know of things. Listen, I think we may disagree a little bit, but I have to say I'm not a fan. And by saying I'm not a fan, I don't even know who this person is. But I don't hate WWE's use of the YouTube Twitch guy. I don't even know what he does. He just goes places. He just does what he does at the Royal Rumble, but that's what he does everywhere. That I show speed. Because first off, if it wasn't him, it looked like we're getting Akira Tozawa, right? So that's just kind of a gimmick.
How about we just get a really good surprise?
Yes, I mean you can't fault
Give me
WWE.
A legend. I would have been happier with Scott Steiner, to be honest with you.
I can't fault WWE. I think somewhere they said it was like 300 million views on his clip alone. I said something to somebody at my day job, which might be true. If he was streaming the event via Facebook Live on his phone, there would probably be more people tuning into that version of the Royal Rumble than the actual broadcast. So you can't necessarily fault WWE on that.
I don't, but I didn't like it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know who this guy is. I would prefer this line of work just doesn't exist, right? Yeah. I have no use for this person. He doesn't entertain me or any of that kind of stuff. But I would say his spot in the Royal Rumble, right? I do like that he took the bump, right? I made it so people who don't like him, like us, who think he's wasting his spot, Braun Breaker, made sure he took a real big bump. And even like an Otis, who looks like a good guy because he looked like he was going to save him there at the end. And I was like, oh, he's going to get saved. I don't want him in this match any longer. And then Otis kind of standing up for wrestlers eliminated him. You know what I mean? So it's like, all right, good. He didn't get treated with like, he's not in here like making eliminations. He's not in here like looking good.
Did you notice though? Speaking of like YouTube and all that, like, did you see Logan Paul in the corner? Like all the wrestlers like took their turn stomping him. That was awesome. I love that. That was like it was like you're not the wrestling guy. Like you got CM Punk getting in there. Everybody's shoving each other to get a kick in on Logan Paul. I don't know if you caught that or not, but that was awesome too.
I mean, I personally, I don't want to like, talk about the Royal Rumble being the greatest of all time or anything like that. That's a little recency bias to do that. I do say from both the women and the men's, and probably the women's being better. I think both were entertaining. I don't go to these events like really caring one way or the other about who wins or loses because that's part of being a wrestling fan. I was never a John Cena fan, but I still went to all the shows because I like wrestling. And even though it's predictable and you know what's going to happen, it's like if you go to a sporting event where you like a team and they're playing a team that you know they're going to crush. You still like going and supporting your team and stuff like that.
I will say this, I know, and anyone can go back to the video, the tape or the audio. So on the women's side, I picked the predictable winner, which was Charlotte Flair. But my guy that I wanted to win, Jey Uso, won. So I'm on both ends. I got the predictable for the women's side. And on the men's side, we got a really good surprise because I think a lot of people were thinking it was not going to be Jey Uso. And that's who I wanted, genuinely wanted. And I was so stoked when he eliminated Cena to win the Rumble. It was a cool moment. It was. I got to see it on TV. I know you were there in person. Did you yeet? Did you do the whole yeet?
I mean, I would say I don't really do that for anybody. I mean, I stood up and I clapped. I guess that's what I. That's.
So wait, you didn't do the yeet?
I will say, when Triple H came out a couple years ago, I was caught on SmackDown bowing down, so I did do that. But and maybe I'll do that as Hall of Fame.
So wait, are you no yeeting? So you're not doing it?
I'm not a big yeet person. I mean, I do think it's cool. I do like seeing it on TV and stuff. So when I say I'm not a huge Jey Uso fan, I like Jey Uso. I take nothing away from him. He's doing great. He's doing what WWE needs and wants, and that's, he's over. I just personally am not, a huge fan of his. He's not my favorite wrestler. I prefer, CM Punk more. If I had to go like meet a wrestler or play as a wrestler on a video game, those kind of things. But I do think that he was a good win. I liked him winning over John Cena at the end there. And I do have to say two things that are about the internet. One, the internet community that talks about the negativity of Jey Uso, that's just the internet community. That's a group of people who are faceless, nameless people. In real life, that's not the case, right?
They're stooges. Stadium, I don't care. They might listen to us. They might watch us. You're a bunch of stooges. Like, Jey Uso is over. Like literally, the whole crowd, minus you, I guess, were yeeting. So I mean, every time he goes anywhere, like he gets the pop. He doesn't have to do anything. Like, part of his delivery when he's on the microphone, he says like 4 words, yeet, and like he doesn't have to say anything. The crowd just goes yeet. He's got the crowd in the palm of his hand. Yeah. He is so over. So like this was the perfect choice for WWE, honestly.
People often forget too that there is more than one pathway to WrestleMania. There's more than one championship to go for. So right now I'm not over here like, preseason quarterbacking WrestleMania, right? Do I prefer Charlotte versus Rhea? Not really. We've seen that a few times already. But at the same time, listen, we're months away from WrestleMania. The WrestleMania is further down the line this year than it's ever been before. And I don't know if, and I get it too also. And I'm okay with the fact that just like a Super Bowl or just like any championship, every WrestleMania doesn't have to top the one before, right? We have WrestleMania 10, which was really awesome. Then WrestleMania 11, which is now WrestleMania 10, right? They have ebb and flows, right? So I'm not expecting that, this year's WrestleMania is going to have John Cena, The Undertaker, The Rock, this whole thing at the end. And it's going to be the most greatest wrestling show of all time. Not thinking about that. So it's okay if it's what it is, right? I'm okay figuring out, as long as it's decent, it's good, it's the best that you have with the people you got, everyone's involved.
What did you make of the lack of surprises for the men's Rumble?
Yeah, I will say we did get Joe Hendry.
That was kind of out of the surprises, though. That was predictable.
I did get excited about Joe Hendry, and partially just because it's fun to say the stuff, right? Again, watching him actually in ring technician, is he Will Ospreay? No, but I mean, is he fun? Yeah, absolutely.
Well, here's the thing too. What did you make of him being the TNA champion and not getting a decent amount of time in the ring. That was kind of a slap in the face in my book.
Yeah, I mean, I think to WWE's standpoint, the TNA champion is the equivalent of an NXT superstar.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's what I think, right? That it's like, okay, thanks for coming. Hopefully, maybe in a year or two, we'll see you again. Like look at Jordana Grace. Jordana Grace, they actually gave her a better rub last year than they did this year, which is really cool. But I'm curious to see, she was in the Royal Rumble. She looked great. And I can't wait to see her on the main roster. I was surprised we didn't get the TNA Women's Champion, but yeah, I get it. This year didn't need so many surprises. It was a pretty star-studded field. You got John Cena, you got Roman Reigns.
Hey, on the women's side, I mean, Alexa Bliss, I was genuinely surprised by Alexa Bliss. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, when she came out at 21, I was very happy to see it because she's been out for 2 years. Like, it's been long overdue, and I'm glad to see she's back. Now, speaking of her really quick, there was reports that she was going to Raw. Now those plans are scrapped, and looks like she's going to go to SmackDown and maybe join the Wyatt Six. Well, I mean, we'll see what happens there. But I wanted to ask you about another surprise in the Women's Rumble. Nikki Bella. Were you cool? Were you a fan, or were you looking for somebody else there?
No, I was fine with Nikki Bella, and I think too. There's some rumblings around there that she might not be. It might not just be like a Trish Stratus where it's a complete one-off. Maybe some more involvement, maybe at WrestleMania or something like that. So, I mean, Nikki Bella. I thought the Women's Royal Rumble. I didn't have any negatives. I think Shotzi. We missed out on having Shotzi in there. A lot of people say that it was Alexa Bliss's last-minute decision to come to WWE, that that was going to be Shotzi's spot. But either way, I think Alexa Bliss got the biggest pop of the whole night for anybody. So the Women's Royal Rumble was good. What do you make of the fact? So we only had 4 matches this year, back for the second straight year, right?
Yeah.
The Royal Rumbles this year were like longer than ever before.
2.5 hours total. 2.5 hours.
Well, and like Roxanne Perez, who now holds like the longest time ever in a Royal Rumble, men or women's. I don't know if it counts the greatest Royal Rumble. I think it might count the greatest Royal Rumble. I think she beat Dan O'Brien, who was like an hour and 8 minutes in the greatest Royal Rumble or something like that, hour 6 minutes. But like she came in third and still lasted an hour and 7 minutes.
By the way, good for Roxanne. Like, she didn't win, but for what she did, I mean, she's the prodigy is what she goes by. I mean, WWE probably thinks she's a prodigy after seeing what she did there.
And I think with these Royal Rumbles, one thing you probably caught on because they said it right during the announcement. We know throughout the years they've gone back and forth with the 90 seconds and the 2 minutes, mostly sticking to the 90 seconds, specifically when they have a lot of match on the card. And now that we got 2 Royal Rumbles, but this year probably realizing there's only 4 match on the card. We charge these people a lot of money. We got to make this a 4-hour show, however we slice it. So we did the 2 minutes, which guarantees that the match itself will be 1 hour prior to like even the last participant coming in, right? Because 2 minutes times 30, right? That's 60 minutes. So, the Royal Rumbles lasted like pretty long. I mean, I know that when Rey Mysterio won the Royal Rumble in 2006, he went from start to finish, and I still think he lasted like 1 hour and 1 minute.
Yeah.
Which was like a record at that time. Because I think that was a 90-seconder, and then they did another like 15 to 10 minutes of in-ring stuff.
Well, the women's was an hour 10. The men's was an hour 20.
Yeah, hour 20. You know what I mean? So, and I'm okay with that. You know why? Because think about it. There's only 4 matches on the card, but at WrestleMania or other pay-per-views where there's more matches on the card, all that just means is there's more downtime. Royal Rumble, what's nice about that for you at home watching on TV or me in person, no commercial breaks during the Royal Rumble. You know what I mean?
It's just continuous.
When it comes to the pay-per-view itself, and when it comes to actual wrestling going on in the ring, the Royal Rumble, might trump every other one-night show. You know what I mean? Like WrestleMania Saturday, WrestleMania Sunday. You might be able to say there's more wrestling in the Royal Rumble than there is those cards.
Speaking of that, like I wanted to that point. So I was originally having one of my good friends come over for the show, who's not a wrestling fan. Unfortunately, the day before, so Friday night, my daughter got sick, and so I had to scrap those plans. So unfortunately, my buddy did not get to experience the Royal Rumble that I wanted him to experience. So I'm waiting to see if I can get him to come over for a WrestleMania, because I want him to see some of the best of what we offer in WWE.
I will say one thing that they had in the arena that was a little more detailed, but I did see it was also on television as well. It went a little less detailed, but either way, it was awesome. And that's for the first time ever. We had a scoreboard, right? We were
Yeah.
being able to pay attention to who's in the ring, who got eliminated. So, like at the arena itself, we had that same marquee, but we actually had like a list. It said active, and then it had a list on one of the
Yeah. It
scoreboards
looked good on TV. The
of
graphics.
everyone
Good.
who was in it. So if I was like, is John, I don't have the best seats, right? So John Cena looks a little small. So if I'm like, is John Cena still in there? I can look over at the scoreboard and it actually has the listing of who's still in the ring. So that's really cool. On top of the fact that it said like which entrant is next, right? Because we've watched so many times. Wait, what number are we on? What's next? Is 15 next? How many people are in the ring? How many people have come out? Like all those kind of questions we no longer had to ask or
Nice.
answer.
It was a nice touch by WWE. I liked it.
Yes, easy to follow, easy to pay attention, right? That's part of the gimmick. I mean, what do you make of that ladder match? I mean, entertaining as hell. We knew the result, but the point is, who cares? We know the result. It's how we get there. And I thought they got there amazingly.
Great spots. Great spots in that match. I want to shout out. I want to shout out DIY and then Motor City Machine Guns. They put on a great match as well. I mean, it was the shortest match on the card at 14 minutes, but I think those two middle matches, and that kind of. They were kind of the in between of the two slices of bread, which is the women's and men's Royal Rumble. I thought they served a great purpose. Like you said, we knew Kevin Owens wasn't going to win, but they did a hell of a job there. And then Motor City Machine Guns and DIY, that finish was interesting as well with the Street Profits getting involved. So overall, I really enjoyed this pay-per-view, this PLE.
And now moving on from the Royal Rumble, I mean, Kevin Owens attacking Sami Zayn at the end of Raw this week. Essentially, the first match we're really starting the true build for WrestleMania. I mean, because everything else is still up in the air. So we got the first true build for this. I'm looking forward to that. With the Elimination Chamber, right? It's always as it's been. It's the next stop. It's the Royal Rumble second chance pay-per-view. You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to that. I think what's good with Raw and SmackDown this upcoming few weeks, right? We have the qualifying, and there's only like 3 weeks between now and Elimination Chamber.
Really quick, I know we haven't touched on it yet. You just mentioned SmackDown. I'm curious to see if Drew McIntyre shows up on SmackDown this week, because there was a lot of reports out there that he was pretty hot about how things played out. Different reports out there. Obviously, Damian Priest eliminated him. The one report out there that I saw was he didn't like the way LA Knight, had to get his stuff in. So I want to get a quick thought on this before we head out. Do you see him, Drew McIntyre, facing LA Knight or Damian Priest at WrestleMania?
I mean, again, it's way too early. We've got another pay-per-view, but I do see him being at WrestleMania. I don't think this is a walkout he's done with the company for any. This isn't a CM Punk situation from 2014. I don't think that he's walking out of the company. He might have been a little hot-headed. I don't know all the truth to that, but just like Corey Graves, right? He's back at the announce table at NXT, right? So I think Drew McIntyre, and if anything, if he is able to use this in any way, more power to him. Super positive. I will say one disappointing from the whole weekend, and we've talked about this at the end of the year. The Wyatts, right? Why are we they didn't show up on SmackDown in Indianapolis. So if you're a fan, let's say in Indianapolis, of the Wyatts, no, they're not there at all. They're not in the Rumble. They're not on the pre-show. They're not on the SmackDown, which is apparently where they've been relegated to. So when you talk about Alexa Bliss going to the Wyatts, I don't know if that's a good idea, because I don't know. Are they
Here's
just
the
like
thing. Being optimistic as I am, maybe that's the infusion they need, is Alexa Bliss. Honestly, that could be, because right now, I mean, as it sits, the Wyatt Six hasn't really. It's kind of fallen flat in my book.
What they need is for them to put them on TV, right? They're not doing anything wrong. They just need them to put them on TV, and I'm afraid before.
But here's the thing: there's two things. Maybe you'll disagree with me, or maybe you won't. Two things that I don't like, and I think a lot of fans would agree with me on this. There's two things that are the worst things that can happen to not only a wrestler but a faction. You're either on TV too much, overexposed, or you're not on enough, where you're not exposed enough.
Yes. But I will say this kind of does remind me, and it's probably even worse. If you remember Bray Wyatt, when he made his big return before his passing, his whole stint was he came back at the main event of a pay-per-view, was nowhere to be seen at the Survivor Series, was in a Mountain Dew pitch black match against, at that time, a mid-carder, LA Knight. And then he was supposed to obviously have a match at WrestleMania against Brock or Bobby. That never happened. But just the idea that like he comes back in October as like in the main event, like the biggest thing to take away from that pay-per-view. And then 2 months later, he's in the ring like with LA Knight. He's doing like SmackDown matches. He's not in the Rumble. He's not in the world title picture. And unfortunately, with the Wyatts, I'm not saying they need to be on TV all the time. They have yet to be on a pay-per-view. And if I'm not mistaken, they've been with the company since around the summer or right after. Like they've been with the company for a minute to not be on a pay-per-view at all yet. So, I don't know with WWE, what's the point of bringing them back, and what's the plan? Right? Are they just there to sell merch, or are they actually there to compete? That's all I know.